Time is 9:22. Men are struggling with mental health, but many are not talking about it. A way to put it pointed there. Joining me today is Paul Krause, a licensed counselor and co-founder of Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids, to talk about why men are suffering in silence and how we can kind of change that. So Paul, thank you so much for being here. Can you kind of just give us the overview here? Why are men struggling with their mental health?
Well, for years, generations, there's been stigma on even discussing any form of weakness or trouble by males, and that's sort of passed down generationally and culturally. So that's part of it. We do know that men are seeking mental health treatment far less than women. They're reporting far less than women, but yet they make up 80% of the suicides completed in the United States every year. Drug and alcohol deaths and other high-risk problems and death are coming at males higher, even though they're not seeking as much help, like for mental health or counseling.
Yeah, and so you've worked in this field for a very long time. I'm assuming all of those statistics you just laid out is exactly why you wanted to focus on this conversation specifically in your work. Is that why? And if so, what made you want to continue the conversation on this broader scale?
Well, I think that men in the United States are in crisis, and when men are in crisis, that is not just affecting men, that's affecting women, it's affecting everyone in our community, and I think that men have an opportunity to help other men get the help they need, but if they don't, then we keep seeing the statistics of the terrible things I was talking about earlier with suicide, substance use, and other things like that continuing to rise, especially with young men.
Yeah, so you mentioned some of these jarring statistics, one being to the 80% of suicides are men. That's definitely a high number, and one that I don't think a lot of people would necessarily think of at first, at least. This is definitely a big problem. What do you think is the root of the problem that's being had right now?
There is many roots to it. But I would say that some of the roots are that men are not expressing themselves, emotionally. They don't know who to talk to. They're turning inward. They might be clinging to old stereotypes of old masculinity, which is you don't cry, you don't discuss things that are difficult, you kind of zip it up and you have to act tough all the time, which is a little bit silly considering that we are dynamic people. You're not just like a stereotype or a cartoon character. You're allowed to go through ups and downs in life, and that's very difficult. I think that there's also increasing male loneliness. People are becoming isolated, staying online, watching video content, kind of lurking in chat rooms and not really getting out there and having friends anymore. And we can see that with the statistics of male loneliness going completely skyrocketing in the last 20 years, especially with men under 40.
Yeah, male loneliness is something you talk about frequently, and we'll get to your podcast in a second, which you do cover that. But first, why do you think that male loneliness is where it's at today? I mean, is there a root cause that you can pinpoint, and how does that affect somebody being lonely in that quote unquote epidemic?
Well, we know that loneliness is very risky. In fact, the Surgeon General compared it to smoking 1 or 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
Every single mental illness you can name or difficulty has a correlation with isolation. Why is this happening? I'm not really sure. I definitely think technology has something to do with it. We're on our devices more. People seem to be living more disconnected, independent lives. And the workforce has different hours. People are working different times. But I do think there's something about men feeling weird about being friends with other men, and when they get in a romantic relationship, sometimes they will drop their other male friends. It's certainly an issue. There was a study released this last week, a Gallup poll, and it said 25% of males aged 15 to 34 felt lonely a lot of the day. And this is at least twice or 3 times as higher as women of that same age group. And it's also higher than almost every other wealthy democracy.
Wow.
Which is troubling.
It is, because I do think part of it, and maybe this is a thought that you've had, male loneliness might come from, it might be easier just to be by themselves, rather than feel emotions that they were never taught to or maybe shunned away from while they were growing up. I don't know, maybe that might be
Actually, I do think
cause.
that's a root cause, is that at an early age, men are told to shut off their emotions and act tough. And there are in some instances that could be useful, but in many instances that's a cultural message that's being programmed to go against our biology.
Yeah.
Every mammal has emotions of fear and anger and stress and sadness that we've studied, including, your dog and your cat. They just express them differently. Oftentimes, women are socialized in our society to be able to express those things, to be able to talk to their friends, to be able to, talk, and that is correlated with health, actually. And men are taught to not discuss these things for whatever reason, because it shows weakness. Again, a little bit silly, I think, and outdated, but continuing to be very quite prevalent in our society.
I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I do think that those numbers do reflect all of the things we're talking about here.
Absolutely. And that stigma really just holding strong after years and years, where I feel like we have come to a point where a lot of society at least says men should feel empowered to express their emotions. Why do you think that stigma has held so strong all this time?
Well, I think it's developed over a long period of time, and I think therefore it's going to take a while. But I do think, unfortunately, people are continuing to live it out for whatever reason. Maybe their parents taught them that. Maybe they see it in movies. In movies, a lot of men are calm and collected under fire, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's really dating me, but like jumping off of a helicopter and seeming calm. And maybe that's a cool thing. We want to aspire to be tough, and that is a positive attribute of men, to be tough and try to be strong. But when you make that a rigid, inflexible point of view and make that your personality, then you're not being a whole person. I would rather you be who you are, whatever your name is, like Tanner be Tanner, whatever that means, however you want to express yourself, versus like, I need to be Tanner, but I need to kind of act like The Rock or something like that.
Yeah, so we know that they're not reporting it. We know that a lot of men don't report their struggles with mental health. Where do we go from here? How do we get better at that? And how do we help those men kind of understand, it's okay to talk about the tough things, or it's okay to talk about what you're feeling?
Well, I think that we have to practice at home, and I think that almost everyone who's watching this show has a relationship with some man in their life.
Sure.
And with that man in your life, you have to go direct. That's my opinion. Of course, I don't think this is from a textbook, but I think being bold, being direct, and sort of meeting them where they're at. If that's the way they talk directly to them. Hey, Dad, Uncle, I'm worried about your health. Have you seen a doctor in the past year? I'm worried about the way that, when I ask you how you're doing, you say the word meh, which is a new kind of bland word, or you talk and make excuses about why you never go out and you stay on the computer all the time in the basement. Talk direct, be bold, be honest, and in fact, some people have a lot of leverage over men. I would say push the agenda to get them to go to counseling or therapy if you think they're in trouble. It's better to have them mad at you now than to have a horrible tragedy in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your podcast, because you do talk about this at length.
Yes.
This is a very interesting podcast called The Intentional Clinician, and you cover a wide range of men's mental health topics, including the loneliness epidemic, which we've just talked about. Let's go ahead and play a clip of that.
Because I believe that trauma-informed therapy and understanding that in the medical world, but also in the society, is so important, and that translates perfectly into the loneliness discussion, because it's going under the same science-based paradigm, understanding ourselves as beings and humans, not just our narrative story that we tell, but that we have basic biological needs that underpin these things. Like you said, a person will feel lonely just like thirst. They'll feel that thirst, but yet, like I was thinking about this, and that's why I'm going to ask you about these misconnections, this misconnection concept and disconnection concept, because people misconstrue. Sometimes they'll make up a story about not being lonely. They'll try to justify it, or they'll get pets, or they'll go get their hair cut way more often than they need, or go to the local bar just to sit around people, like coffee shops.
Yeah, we're just talking about that line there. Some of the coping mechanisms that men sometimes will do. Get a pet, go to the barber shop a lot. Keeping up on that haircut. Yeah, something that I think we've all maybe heard of along the way. This is a very interesting conversation, particularly in that podcast. But you have a bunch of these podcasts that talk about the ins and outs of mental health. Can you talk about the podcast and what made you want to start it, and what your hope was for creating that?
Yeah, I started the Intentional Clinician podcast in 2017, and my hope is just to spread free information to people that may be struggling, or just people that want information. That's really just the whole point of it. And I interview authors from all over the world. I interview people that are bestsellers. I interview people that no one's heard of. So I enjoy it. I think it's fun. I learn a lot from it, and I think it's unedited, so it is longer. It's more of a long-form conversation, and I'm just hoping to reach people that maybe traditional media wouldn't reach, and it's free.
Yeah,
So
there you
that's
go.
why.
Yeah, I was able to download it right from the website. So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, pretty very interesting podcast that you have out there. Let's talk about some other resources here in our community that men can go to literally today if they would like to. So there's a holistic center. Can you talk about that? What is that about, and how can men get help there?
Well, yes. We have at Health for Life Counseling is where I work,
Yep.
and we have a lot of male therapists there that are trained in the latest trauma-informed modalities, ways to work with men that don't want to be there. Our goal is to get you out of therapy. We're not trying to get you for life. We're not trying to get a subscription model. We want to get you in. We want to help you meet your goals and go out and live your life. So the Holistic Health Center of West Michigan is a partner group, and we're combining Health for Life Counseling and the Holistic Health Collective of West Michigan, and we have now a new place on the Beltline that's opening right now, actually, and that is for men and women, of course, and there are doctors there, medical doctors, there's acupuncturists, there's different types of therapies, and of course, psychotherapy, therapy, counseling, whatever you want to call it, is there as well.
Okay. What about this idea of trauma-informed, counseling here that you talked about in the podcast? So can you talk about that, and also this trauma-informed counseling center? Is that what I'm understanding it is?
Yes. The Trauma-Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids is basically what I wanted to emphasize when I moved to Grand Rapids in 2017, because I didn't see a lot of that care here, and that involves specific therapies such as EMDR therapy, which has been making the rounds, and the celebrities are utilizing it. It's a lot easier than just traditional talk therapy for a lot of men and women. They like it because they don't have to talk as much. The concept of trauma-informed is way too long to get into this, but it's just a new science-based approach that is non-judgmental, that doesn't kind of focus on the problems, more just like, why are these symptoms showing up? What's the origin? Okay, now that we've found these symptoms, we've found these issues that are coming up, let's address the origin of it, and within hopefully 10 to 15 sessions of doing different modalities, we can reduce your reaction to these past issues, and thus you have less symptoms. It's a pretty straightforward and fast therapy techniques, trauma-informed therapy.
Okay, I know we've got to get going on the rest of the show here, but I want to ask you one more thing about your National Violence Prevention Hotline. This is not exactly up and running just yet, but it's going to be, right? Tell us about that really quick.
Yes, the National Violence Prevention Hotline, you can Google that. It is a hotline we are developing. It should go live this summer. We just got a lot of funding out of Denver, a lot of private money, and we are staffing it right now with 24/7 crisis counselors. And this is not for victims. This is for potential perpetrators of violence that are planning violent acts against people they don't like, shootings, stabbings, whatever it is. We're here to take those calls and try to help those people get into counseling. It's also for the family members of concerned people who are afraid to call the police or afraid to go to their doctor about it. They can call and get confidential help. What do I do about my family member who's acting this way, or my friend?
All right. Well, we appreciate your time, and of course, you got a lot going on, and we appreciate the conversation around something that seems pretty taboo for a lot of folks out there. So thank you so much. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Ken.
it.
Thanks.